How to exercise with an ostomy bag. I'm JC, clinical exercise physiologist and cancer exercise specialist, and we're going to dive deep into how to exercise with an ostomy bag. Now, regardless of the type of surgery you had, it is possible to exercise with an ostomy bag on. It doesn't mean you should avoid movement or exercise. It just means that you do need to change the way you exercise up a little bit and avoid certain movements, and that's absolutely okay. Now, there are some things that you want to consider, like don't put pressure on the direct area. So, like no crunching or sit ups or leg raises, things like that. Um, Depending on how you're doing the leg raise, you might be able to get away with it. But generally, you don't want to be crunching up the abdomen and you don't want to be lifting up too much weight too soon. So, you want to make sure that your core is strong enough to handle the exercises and the movements that you're doing. Now, with that being said, a lot of people are scared of um, being able to get a hernia or damaging the organs or damaging the bag or anything like that. It's very normal. That's common. But the biggest thing that I want you to know is that the more you avoid exercise and movement, the more those fears become true. So, with a hernia specifically, the biggest risk of a hernia is actually a weak core. The weaker your core, aka the longer you go without strengthening it and without exercise, the more likely you are to get a hernia. Now, people get a hernia for all types of reasons throughout the day, and generally that means that their core is too weak to handle their day to day or anything that's slightly above their day to day. So, for example, if you don't exercise and you need to move for one day and you had to pick up your couch that's above the ordinary from your day to day, your core is not strong enough to do that, that could give you a hernia. So your risk of a hernia does increase after abdominal surgery because it severely weakens your core. So not exercising is counterintuitive to that fear. It actually makes it more likely for you to get a hernia. So strengthening your core and exercising correctly is extremely important. Like I said earlier, this doesn't mean you need to be doing sit-ups and crunches. It just means that you need to be smart about your training and adapt accordingly. Now, smart about your training means you need to control the movement. So, meaning that it's a nice, slow, and controlled tempo. You need to control your breathing and the weight that you're doing or that you're using. Okay. So, with the movement itself, you want to make sure that you're not crunching over or you're not doing exercises that add on extra pressure. So, anything that crunches your stomach or brings your knees to your pelvis, to your rib cage, is something that's going to be adding too much abdominal pressure. So, like a leg press, you wouldn't want to do, but you can do a leg extension because that's not adding extra pressure to your core. Now, another thing you can control is how you do that movement. So, for example, if you're standing up versus sitting down with your back supported specifically is going to put less pressure and less strain on your core. If you're doing a shoulder press, standing up straight, you're adding a lot more pressure and tension on your core when you're pressing up above the head. But if you have a back support, whether that's through a machine or just a regular bench, you're going to be reducing the pressure on your core. So having some support during the movement actually helps. Same thing for exercises that require balance. I don't want you to have to incorporate balance during the workout. I want you to just be able to exercise. And what I mean by that is if you're doing a lunge or a Bulgarian split squat, hold on to something. Work on your balance at the end of the workout specifically, but not while you are actually trying to strengthen and grow your muscles. That is something that many people don't talk about, but leave the balance training for a separate part of your workout. Focus on actually building the strength in the muscle during the workout session. So take away that balance portion and just focus on the movement that you're focusing on for that session. That's going to help reduce strain on the abdomen and lower back or on your hips. So making sure that you have some support is always good. It also lowers your risk of injury at the gym, especially if there's neuropathy or you're in treatment. Now, in terms of the speed, you want to do it slow on the way down, slow on the way up. No momentum. You should have no momentum during your swing, during your bicep curls, during your squats. It should be a slow movement down where your muscles working all the way down and your muscles working on the way up. it should always be controlled. There should be no bouncing up and down. Now, that's going to make sure that you're doing the proper form, technique throughout the movement. But most importantly, it's going to help you control your breathing better. If you're doing the movement sporadically without any real control, you're going to have a harder time breathing. And the most common mistake I see in the gym is that people breathe in not properly. They breathe incorrectly. They're just going through the motion, and they might be doing the motion well, but they're holding their breath or they're breathing the wrong way. And if you have light weights, that's okay. But when you start actually getting better in your lifts, you want to be challenging yourself, and it's going to require more intentional breathing. So, for example, on a squat, you need to breathe properly. On a deadlift, you need to breathe properly. On a pull down, you need to breathe properly. Anything that requires multiple muscle groups that brace your back, or you're gonna need your core to be activated, you're gonna need to be breathing properly. So that way you're not straining the core as much or straining your back as much. So learning to breathe is extremely important to make sure that you're maintaining safety while you're working with an ostomy bag. So what does that look like? Now, I want you to practice without any weights or with light weights or on isolated movements. Isolated movements just means doing like a bicep curl. It's an exercise that focuses on one body part or one muscle group alone. So, for example, a squat is not isolated because a squat works your core, your back, your legs. A bicep is just going to work your arms. That's pretty much it. So, with an isolated movement, like for example, a bicep curl, I want you to practice breathing in on the way down and breathing out on the way up. Proper breathing always breathes out when you're using force, because you don't want two forces going at it at the same time. So you don't want to be holding in your breath, meaning putting pressure internally inside your body, and then having an extra weight pushing against that internal force. That is damaging. That can affect your heart rate. It can affect the nervous system. It can cause you to pass out. It can affect the pressure inside the body, aka causing a hernia. So you want to avoid those two pressures competing with one another. So you always want to breathe out whenever you're doing the force. So on a bicep curl, very simple movement. The force is on the way up. That's when you're breathing out. On a shoulder press, the force is when you're going up. That's when you're breathing out. Same thing on a deadlift. That's when you're going up. It's when you're breathing out. Now, it depends on the movement, but generally it's whenever you're going away from your body for the most part. Some movements, it's when you're coming towards your body, like what's it called? A leg curl, a hamstring curl. The heels are coming towards your butt. That's when you're breathing out. So whenever you're using the most force, breathe out. Now, there's also something called bracing, and bracing is what protects your back during the main lifts. This is more advanced. I don't recommend you start doing this with weight if you are a beginner, but if you are intermediate, this is a great time to be starting. Obviously, start without any weight. Learn to brace first. And even as a beginner, you can learn to brace first and then slowly add weight over time. Bracing is not something you want to do when you just got an ostomy bag, or if you don't know how to properly lift with certain exercises using bracing. But bracing is essentially where you breathe in, but instead of breathing in through your chest, you breathe in through the belly or the stomach or the abdomen, right? So if you put your right hand on your chest and your left hand on your belly and just take a normal deep breath in, generally your right hand on your chest is going to come up first, and then you breathe out normal, right? But if you breathe in through your belly or your stomach, breathe in first. My stomach expanded first and then my chest. That's called bracing. When your stomach braces or stomach expands first, it tightens your lower back and it keeps it in a neutral posture or a neutral position, so that when you're lifting, you don't get these small little movements that are going to tweak different muscles. So bracing is extremely important for protecting your back. Bracing should be done, especially if you're a beginner or even intermediate or you're learning how to brace, when you are doing a sit to stand. That's a great time to just practice it. When you're doing a glute bridge, another great time to practice it. Or when you're doing dead bugs, those are great exercises to learn how to brace properly during an exercise. Same mechanics still apply. When you're going up, you're breathing out. You're not holding the breath the whole time, but you can do bracing with more manageable exercises and movements to help your body stay healthy and keep that spine aligned during exercises. Because the biggest risk of injury in the gym for anybody, by the way, is weak muscles that are lifting too much weight too soon. That's the biggest risk of injury. It's, once again, I'm adding way too much weight. My muscles are not strong enough to do that, aka I get hurt in the gym lifting weights, cause a hernia, whatever it is. So, and then that same thing happens for running. That's a side note, but regardless, that's what we want to prevent. So we want to strengthen the muscle slowly, breathe properly, and do it slow and controlled. Now, I'm not saying, when I say slow and controlled, I don't mean take 2 hours to do a bicep curl. I mean that your hands shouldn't drop to the ground and then slow up. I mean that it should slowly come down where you feel the muscles working and then come up. Okay? Practice full range of motion with every single exercise. Practice your breathing with those smaller muscle group exercises. So that way, when you do larger muscle group work, like a deadlift, a squat, whatever it is, or a good morning, or whatever you might be doing that day, you can do your breathing better and your bracing better. Now, couple things to avoid. Like I said, too much pressure, so going too much weight too soon. Second thing to avoid is twisting vigorously, jumping. Yeah, those are big no-nos to avoid. And you also want to make sure that you are not um, holding your breath when you're lifting. That is a big, big key, is making sure you're not holding your breath, because once again, it's that added pressure that should not be in there. You don't want two pressure forces going at it while you're lifting. If you don't feel comfortable in the gym, some tips that you can use is wear baggier clothing. Wear clothing with some stripes or colors on them to hide the bag. Make sure it's empty before as well, and also make sure to have something that holds it in place. So, for example, some women use high waisted pants. You can have a belt. You can have some sort of wrap if you like to go swimming. All those things definitely help keeping it in place, making sure that it's empty. But overall, exercise is safe. In terms of exercise selection, it's going to depend what feels comfortable. I have an online coaching clients who can go cycling without any aches or pains or discomfort, and I have another one who hates cycling because it's very uncomfortable. So it's going to depend on what you can do and what's comfortable for you, but definitely avoiding those exercises that put too much pressure on the abdominal, that have you crunched over. It's super important. So with that being said, most exercises are going to be safe as long as you're following the rules of not crunching or twisting. Certain exercises you're going to need to build up to, like a squat or a deadlift, and that's absolutely fine. But just because you can't do them right now doesn't mean they're not safe forever. So work your way up slowly. And if you have any questions on how to exercise with an ostomy bag, go ahead and leave it below. Once again, I'm JC, cancer exercise specialist and clinical exercise physiologist. Take care.